everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is the last session before our live Q&A to wrap up the conference. So thank you all for being here. This session is about IBM Bob. It's your software development lifecycle partner. So we've got Andrew Laidlaw here from IBM. He's the IBM Power and Cloud Ecosystem CTO for the UK and Ireland. If you guys have questions throughout the session, you can put them in the Q&A tab on the right. Andrew will address them all at the end, and any questions that we don't get to, we will address in the live Q&A at the end of the day today. If you have any other comments, you can put them in the chat function on the right. And without further ado, I'll hand it off to Andrew.
Thank you very much, Brooke. Yeah, and it is great to be here and speaking to people about what is a really interesting subject, which is IBM Bob. But more importantly, it's about what AI tooling can do to help with software development more generally. And this is about IBM Bob. Bob is AI-powered software development lifecycle tooling. It's an IDE, so an integrated development environment for developers to use, but with AI built in at every stage to help guide that process. And that is everywhere within the software development lifecycle. This is not just about an AI agent generating code. This is about an AI agent helping and assisting the development process to get the most out of the developers in an organization and to help boost productivity and generate better quality software at the end of the day. But rather than talk about absolutely everything that Bob can do, I'm going to narrow it down a little bit and talk about AI development tooling for IBM I specifically. And primarily that is looking at the older legacy code, the applications that have been running your business for 10, 20, sometimes 30 years, where they're built on RPG code. It's really efficient. It's compiled in a really efficient way. It is fully integrated into the IBM I environment, but the source code itself may be older, might be based on older standards that are harder for new people to understand, and it may be holding back what you can do as a business because the skills, the knowledge, the experience aren't there. And this is a common thing. This is not something that is unique to IBM I either, but it's something that we're seeing a lot. That there is a shrinking pool of talent and knowledge about the application stack, about the code that underpins these businesses, and that it can take a lot of time to help new people coming in to really understand and become productive on that older source code. So this is about keeping the business alive as much as it is about modernizing the code itself. And that's where bringing in the right tools, bringing in responsible AI in a governed fashion really helps reduce those risks. And that's what IBM Bob does. Bob is a development environment that is designed to help solve the challenges that customers are seeing, that users of platforms like IBM I are seeing out there. And there are tools designed to help understand the code. So understand what that RPG code is all about, explain how it behaves, how it can be used, who interacts with it, refactor it, bring in more meaningful variable names, bring in more meaningful subroutine names, move from old fixed format code to free format code that is doing the same job, but is easier to understand. But then it's also about generating new code, new subroutines, new capabilities to expand that existing code base, to transform the application, to bring new modern interfaces, something that allows AI agents to come in and work with the data that's held by that application. Also, to build in more DevOps capabilities, things like automated testing, using RPG unit, things like that. But it's all very well talking about this and saying, here are all the great things that can be done with our tooling. I actually would much rather show you. And this is IBM Bob. It's a little bit squished because I know screen real estate isn't that great. So I've tried to get everything as big as possible. It does look nicer in practice. Also, this is a dark screen with colorful writing on it, something that you should all be used to, but we can also move to a lighter, slightly more readable version of the same thing. For those of you who've worked with VS Code, this will look very familiar. You have your source files and objects listed on the left, so you can see what's going on in your project. We've got the main editing space with your application code sitting in that middle space, ready to be edited. And then on the right in this sidebar is where we have IBM Bob. This is Bob. Bob is an AI agent. You interact with Bob in natural language, and you can ask for help performing certain tasks. One of the things that Bob brings is a concept of modes, where you can interact with Bob in different ways that are designed to provide different sorts of output. So we have a plan mode. Because Bob is intended to work across the entire software development lifecycle, a big part of that is planning. It's asking, how can I do this? What does this application look like? If I wanted to do this, what's the best way? How do I apply security? That kind of thing. Planning mode doesn't actually change any of your code. It's just a chance to discuss your challenge with another developer, in this case, an AI developer. We have code mode. That is about writing the code. And yes, Bob understands RPG. Bob has been trained on a wide range of data sets, uses multiple different large language models behind the scenes, depending on the use case, but can work with RPG, COBOL, and hundreds of other languages. We've got ask mode, where you can ask questions of your code, of the environment, of the application. We've got orchestrator modes. We've got specific modes for IBM I development, which have been designed and written for a particular purpose and bring in a huge amount of context about how IBM I applications work and the integrations that they have in place. And we've also got the ability to add your own modes as well, specifically for your business that might bring in your own business rules or best practices. But I'm going to start by asking a question. I'm going to point to a menu source file. I'm going to point to a physical file, in fact, a couple of physical files for articles and orders and customers as well. And I'm going to ask, what kind of application is this? What's it for? What's the purpose? Who are the users? And then, as if I am a new developer coming in and looking at this for the first time, I want to keep this simple. Bob can go away and can look and read those source files and can read those physical files and can understand what's in them. It doesn't look into comments because there are no comments in this code. It doesn't look at documentation because there is no documentation for this code. So this is just looking at the source code. And Bob will come back with a nice, clear explanation. It's an order management and inventory system. Here are the main functional areas. We work with articles, customers, orders, providers, customer orders. We can create things, we can report on things. We've got various other utilities to manage various things. And here are the users of the system. I could also ask questions like, can you document this? Can you create a README file for the entire application? And can you include diagrams? And in fact, that's something that I did a couple of days ago. And it comes back with some very clear guidance. So I can open up, where is it? My README file. And I can see what IBM Bob has decided is the purpose of this application. It's created lots and lots of information here. And if I go back to this and choose to preview it, you can actually see it writes this in a nice, clear markdown file. It will talk to me about the purpose, the application, the functional areas, the same things it's given me. And it will give me details of how a customer is defined, how an order is defined. It will draw diagrams of business flow, data flow, things like that. This is really useful for new developers coming in, but also, let's face it, this is really useful for existing developers who may have used this code, been working on this application for a long time, but don't necessarily see the bigger picture. So there's a quick summary there. There's a lot of information to build in. And all of this is done within just a chat interface. So I can follow that up with further questions if I want to keep the context of this discussion. Or if I start a new task, I can change the context. I can start asking about different things. So one of the other things I mentioned was refactoring. Once I've understood the code, once I have an explanation of what my code does, I can ask for our friend Bob to replace variable names in a file with more meaningful ones. At no point here am I saying what I mean by meaningful or explaining in any way what these things mean. But Bob has the context, has the understanding of what's going on, and it will make recommendations of what variables I should change and what I should change them to make them more meaningful. The reason that it hasn't done anything here is that I am still in ask mode. So even while I was saying, I want you to do something specific, the mode says, I'm just here to answer questions. If I change this to code mode and ask exactly the same thing, now Bob will go away using the context and it says, I understand. You want me to actually apply the changes to the file. Okay, let's do that. And it's asking to edit that file, to make those changes in place in the source code that I've got. So here we have Bob going to work, actually making changes. And you can start to see that happening in the editing view. So you can see what's been removed, what's been added, what's been changed, and you get the clear delineation of these things. You get to see in a simple view what's going on, what has been changed. And then once you've looked at it, once you, as the developer in charge, have checked that everything makes sense, that you're happy with the changes, you have to give permission to save. Now, there is an auto approval function. So we can say that actually we will allow Bob to read everything. I've already set that one as enabled, but Bob is going to ask permission to write anything or to execute anything within my environment or to apply any of these additional capabilities. In this case, I can save it. That has made changes to my code. That's gone in, edited that file, and made it much clearer and much easier to read that file. But not only that, Bob will follow up every single one of these tasks with a summary to say, here are the changes that have been made. And more importantly, here is the explanation of why that has happened. What logic, what thought process, what reasoning has gone into the changes that are made. All of these things keep the functionality the same. Bob understands RPG. Bob understands the way this code is written, understands the nature of an IBM I environment. So this is all based on the context in which your application resides. So this is looking at customer records. We've also got various programs looking at country files. And because I'm opening different things within the IDE, I can start a new task and Bob understands what it is that I'm working on. I don't have to point out every time, look into this file, make this change. One of the things that we can also do is use Bob to generate new capabilities. So I can ask a question or make a statement to add new features to validate our country data. So adding new functionality, adding new subroutines. I can be very specific in this, and that is worthwhile doing. I can add validation for country codes. I can create sub-procedures to format phone numbers, and I can add functions to validate email addresses. At the moment, I'm still in the code mode. So this is a generic mode looking at working with all manner of different types of code, different languages, Python, Node.js, C, C#, C++, Java, whatever it might be. But because I've got an IBM I development mode in my Bob interface, this brings this down to a much more focused view of just IBM I environments. The functionality behind the scenes is the same, but we're adding context, we're adding awareness of what's actually happening in this world. You can see Bob has already identified that this is the file that I'm working with, and therefore that's the one to read. But it's also identified that there are other files related. So there is a country physical file. Bob has also created a to-do list. So I can see, yes, it's going to analyze the country code structure. It's going to add a function. It's going to add another sub-procedure. It's going to add this validation function, and it's going to update the prototype file as well. So not only is it doing what I've specifically asked to do in the file that I'm working with, but it also understands the impact on other parts of the application. If I approve all of this, Bob will go away and start doing that work. If I reject this, I've got a chance to open a discussion about that to-do list, maybe add in another task along the way, or remove one of those steps because I've changed my mind. But if I approve, I'm giving Bob the opportunity to work through this to-do list, to work with all of the tools and all of the things that I've said, and it will still ask me for confirmation when making changes to files. Another element here, as it's making changes, is that it will create a checkpoint. So before making these changes, there will be a checkpoint in my source code management system, in this case Git, that I can roll back to if anything goes wrong during this process. And this is a big part of what Bob provides in the development lifecycle, is that it is rigorous and it follows good practices in terms of source code management, in terms of managing your changes, being able to document and follow what changes have happened and when and by who, and asking for permission. Checking in with the developer as they're using these tools to make sure that things are correct at every step of the way. So this is Bob generating new RPG code, generating new code in my countries repository. So adding new functions, adding new sub-procedures. You can see here, this is added a validation for phone numbers. That is exactly what I asked for. And that is based on the country code. So it's identifying the country code. It's identifying what that should look like, what the formatting of those phone numbers will be. I haven't had to go in and explain what that formatting looks like. That's just something that Bob understands. If I approve all of this, Bob will then finish going through the to-do list, and it will even say, okay, I would like to run this. Now, this is where we have a slight problem with IBM I in that because Bob is running on a developer workstation, it can understand the code, it can work with the code. At this point in time, it cannot compile that code onto an IBM I developer system because it doesn't have access to one. But don't worry about that for too long. For those of you who've worked with Visual Studio Code and RPG, you will know that there are extensions within Visual Studio Code that connect into IBM iDeveloper systems, allow you to compile and run things using actions, simplifying these processes. Well, those extensions are also available in IBM Bob, which is based on Visual Studio Code. More importantly, in the very near future, we will have an additional premium pack for Bob, specifically targeted at IBM I use cases, which will have that integration into the way that RPG developers work. The ability from within the development environment to compile code, run applications, run tests, so that the full development lifecycle can be encapsulated within this one environment. So this test won't work because my environment is not set up for it. But I can reject this, I can move forwards, and all tasks have been completed, even though I've said, actually, don't bother with one of those steps. If I approve all of that, I say I'm happy with what Bob's done. There is an element of feedback that goes into this. But at the end of this task, as with every task, there is a summary generated that explains what's been done, why it's been done, and how it has impacted the way that this tool works. And one final example, one that is quite commonly used, is to start looking at older code and older interfaces. A lot of people still refer to IBM I and RPG as legacy or heritage, and a lot of that is due to the green screen interfaces that, while very efficient, don't necessarily look modern and up to date by today's standards. So if you're trying to convince your CEO or your CFO about just how modern and up to date IBM I is, and I think we all agree it is a very modern and up to date operating system, then can we get some help modernizing those interfaces, making things look more like a reactive web-facing front end? Well, let's ask Bob. What is the best way to replace the green screen display file interface with that more modern and reactive approach? And because Bob is acting as a software development partner, there is no one answer. There is no simple, here is how you do it. And that is where Bob comes in really useful as a conversational assistant. So Bob has gone away and said, here are some modernization approaches. We can create an API-first architecture. Here are the tools that would be used. Here are the frameworks that we can put in place. We've also got a migration strategy that can go with that. Here is the technology that you need on your IBM I system. Here is the technology required in the front-end stack. And then here are some of the specifics for your particular module. This is the file that I was looking at. This is the file that we've been editing, the one that's open. And it's saying, here are some API endpoints that you could create. This is based on really good standards. And then here are the modes that you can use within Bob to help generate these components and generate things. Will even give me a diagram of what the interactions look like and the next steps to take. If we were to move forwards, and sadly we're running out of time, we could use Bob to help us design that reactive interface, to build the API services, to create that architecture and the interfaces and the imagery to create something new from an existing front end, taking your existing display file interfaces, that green screen look, and converting that into something much more modern, freeform, and reactive. So that is just some of the many capabilities of IBM Bob. And once we get into all of the other elements of what can be done, we can see that Bob is there to help understand what code you have, to explain what that application does, help with refactoring, help with generating new capabilities, transforming what you have into something that is ready for modernization, ready for new capabilities. And the bit that I didn't show you, it can also generate unit tests. Using things like RPG Unit, using other tooling that's out there, IBM Bob can help you build those automated tests to make sure that IBM I is part of a DevOps lifecycle, to simplify the process of testing, running, and using your applications on IBM I. I mentioned earlier, we have a premium package coming out, which will give us that native IBM I execution. Keep an eye out for that in the next few months to learn more. But for today, IBM Bob already understands RPG. Bob already works with the logic of the IBM I system, the integrations that we have in place, and can provide a huge amount of value. And you can try it out for yourself. There is a free trial available for up to 30 days and a huge amount of videos, blog posts, and other things to help guide you through how you can get the most out of it. Okay, that's it for me for the moment. Please do give it a try.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew, for all this very, very helpful information. We will wrap because there is also another Q&A session right following this to wrap up this whole experience. So please go ahead there to ask any other remaining questions or reach out to Andrew as well, as he has awesome links here right on the screen. So thank you again for all being here, and we'll see you at the next session.